Live from Johannesburg, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana. I'm not Jane, but I'm standing in for her tonight. Coming up on the show. In South Africa, electricity is a prized commodity. It's stolen, sold, and even fought over. The caretaker of electricity, Eskom, has been marred by controversy and allegations of corruption. They're now in the middle of wage wars, and they may be forced to retrench workers going forward. The question is, how did we get here? That's part of what we'll examine tonight. Coming up on the show, I'm joined by Suzanne Daniels, who you would have heard today has been dismissed by Eskom over several charges that she faced, an inquiry finding her guilty on all 4 charges that were brought to her. And then we'll also bring in the former acting CEO of Eskom, Mathela Koko, who will also have to answer for his time in the hot seat at the helm of the parastatal. For now, though, Shahan Ramkisoon is standing by. Shahan, you have all the day's headlines for us.
Yes, thanks for that, Cathy. Appreciate it. And of course, this is the story dominating our headlines. Eskom has dismissed its suspended head of legal and compliance, Suzanne Daniels. Daniels was suspended in March. She was facing 4 charges, including misconduct and distribution of confidential information. Daniels was also under investigation for her involvement in McKinsey and trillion transactions linked to the Gupta family. Last year, she testified before the Public Enterprises Committee's inquiry into state capture. Eskom says a letter confirming Daniels' dismissal has been sent to her. Daniels, of course, speaking to Cathy in a short while. Now, 2 ANC provinces are finally electing new leaders. Legal attempts to prevent both the KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng elective conferences have failed. In KwaZulu-Natal, the Youth League is adamant it wants Ndumiseni Ntuli as the next provincial secretary. And in Gauteng, acting provincial chairperson David Makura is hoping to get re-elected. President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the opening address.
They will be expecting an ANC that is going to provide basic services. They will be expecting an ANC, comrades, that is going to fix the sewage that is leaking. They will be expecting an ANC that will repair the taps where they live. They will be expecting an ANC that they can embrace.
And Police Minister Bheki Cele wants a resolution to the violence in Hermanus. He'll be meeting with community members on Tuesday. Residents of the town in the Western Cape have been clashing with police since last week.
They have issues especially about the police. They have issues about the service delivery, so that will be put on the agenda. They have issues about the people that are arrested. I say we will meet with the committee that is there. They wanted those that are arrested to be part of the meeting. I said, no, put it on the agenda. We'll talk about it come Tuesday. They wanted the police to be removed. I said, no. For now, the police will patrol the area, and let's talk about all those things on Tuesday. But definitely we're here on Tuesday, and it looks like we'll work hard to find the solution.
Those are the headlines. Over to Cathy.
Thanks for that, Shahan. Let's begin here, and it's our top story, as you heard from Shahan there tonight. Eskom dismissing its suspended head of legal and compliance, Suzanne Daniels. Daniels joins us now to discuss the latest development. Suzanne, according to the Eskom statement I have in front of me, you have already been served with your letter of dismissal today.
Yes, that's correct, Cathy.
And, I mean, talk to us about receiving that letter and being dismissed from Eskom. How are you feeling tonight?
Actually, I was not surprised by the verdict handed down by Advocate Kasim. It was quite clear from the beginning that he was not really paying much attention to my verdict and the evidence presented. And as you know, in matters of this nature, the incumbent board and management really drive the agenda and ultimately get their way.
So are you saying that part of the process was just a contrived way of getting you out of Eskom?
Yes, I maintain that in my papers, and I maintain that today still.
Why?
Well, you know, it's not about what I did, Cathy. It's about what I said. You know, I was in Parliament. I exposed what was happening in Eskom. Also, if you look at the reports, there are certain people who are, like for example, who were mentioned in the Bowman's report, who are still in their positions today. So there were 7 people mentioned in the report, 5 have resigned, and 2 remain in exactly the same positions that they are today. On the other hand, we have an executive management, which the board and whoever tries to portray as new management, but they were around. They are prescribed officers. They were around. They what's the word? Threw a blind eye on what happened. And I mean, you can trace this back to 2008. Load shedding started then. There are people who are in key positions now who were there in 2008. What did they do? They turned a blind eye to the state capture.
But you know, you talk about them turning a blind eye to state capture, but right up until the parliamentary inquiry, which is when I suppose you put forward the most detailed testimony, you yourself could be accused of the very same thing.
Well, I have been accused, but as you will see I did a number of disclosures to media as well, hoping that that would get the attention of the powers that be. That didn't work, and the next best thing for protection as for whistleblowers was the parliamentary inquiry. You will also recall that it was supposed to start in August. In July last year, it was delayed, and I was getting a bit frustrated because the decision had already been made. Now, all these things were put before Advocate Kasim as well. He chose to say, no, they're not bona fide.
But did you give the likes of Matele Koko and Anoj Singh, who you name in your reports, the right of reply to those reports?
Those reports were compiled by Bowman's. They did not consult with Matele Koko and Anoj Singh on those reports. I assume, should they have gone further, that would have been the case.
But did it not concern you that you didn't get the response of the parties, given the nature of allegations that you raised in those reports?
Well, the allegations were quite clear-cut based on the documentary evidence put before us. It was the signature of invoices. It was the signature of board submissions. So it was clearly substantive evidence. So a right of reply, they had the right of reply in the parliamentary inquiry, which we've seen was extremely detailed.
Let's talk about the charges that you were facing up against, that you've now been found guilty of at Eskom. The first one is the distribution of confidential
of the public enterprises, and he's a bona fide third party to Eskom.
So you're saying that you did not share any information with Gupta-related companies or individuals during your time at Eskom?
That's correct.
So then why would Matele Koko then accuse you of being the person who signed off on some of the Tegeta deals?
Well, that would be convenient for Matele Koko to do that and forget that he's the executive authority on the matter. I was instructed I was in various positions in Eskom. I was instructed to prepare certain documentation for board. I checked the resolutions, I checked the content, and I checked that they made sense to the board. However, it is still the executive who warrants that it's correct, and that's what they're presenting to the board.
And part of the question also is around documents, of course, and this comes up again in the inquiry around processes that led to the appointment of Brian Molefe, and even just some of the dealings that you were told to destroy by the minister. Why did you do it?
I didn't destroy the information. I actually kept it. The instructions on the appointment of Brian Molefe, that is entirely a ministerial appointment. It's not like a normal corporate company. And I think that's why the current leadership is saying the board is in charge. However, in terms of Eskom's memorandum of incorporation, the Minister of Public Enterprises appoints the CEO, the CFO, and even the board members.
In terms of the allegations of your involvement in the McKinsey and Trillion transactions, you've also been found guilty there, and we know that Eskom is currently involved in a process of recuperating those monies, over 1 billion rand.
Well, Eskom only recouped 902 million. So it's really not, contrary to McKinsey's undertaking, it did not pay back the 1 billion rand. Also, my involvement in the matter was to ensure that the documents going to the Exco Procurement Committee, who was actually the committee, and that's why I talk about the current executives, because this was made up of Exco members who made the decision to recommend the McKinsey transaction to the board tender committee. So those people are still there, you know, and it was a unanimous decision. My advice was on how to rescind a round-robin resolution, which Eskom then purported to be a motivation for the McKinsey transaction.
So basically, you're washing your hands of that charge too. You're saying
Yes.
that you're not guilty there.
No, you know, I was doing my job.
Okay. You know, I think at the end of the day, there's also the charge against around you using Eskom monies to help the former SABC chairperson in the SABC parliamentary inquiry.
Look, at that stage, he was chairperson of Eskom. And there were lots, you will recall, there were lots of calls for his head. And consistent with what I said at the time, I felt it would be in the interest of Eskom to ensure that its chairman remained. We only had about 4 or 5 directors. We would have caused more damage. You know, the decision went to the board. I did not make it in isolation. It went to the board. The decision was endorsed, and then I could carry on.
So what is your role in terms of the finalizations of contracts and documents that involve Eskom?
It depends on which way it's going. I usually only get involved in matters that go to board.
Yes.
You know, the general transactions are dealt with by legal advisors below. We have a team of about 22 legal advisors. There's a defined delegation of authority, and we stick to that.
But your role where the board is concerned now, what would that have been?
I would have made sure that there was enough information in front of the board to make a decision. If there wasn't, the executive needed to come and explain.
So basically, you would have been close. You would have close first-hand information of a lot of these allegations that are being brought forth to you.
Yes, and that is what I provided to Parliament. And I also provided some of it in the disciplinary hearing.
Given the strength of the allegations that have been put against you, do you understand why Eskom felt you had a case to answer to, even though you see it as an agenda?
Well, I answered the case. You know, the answer just was ignored in its entirety. I haven't had the chance to read Advocate Kasim's recommendation, as it's about 48 pages long. And it only arrived, pardon me, it arrived at about 3:30 this afternoon.
And of course, you say this at a time when there is a new dawn at Eskom. We have obviously the new board and several changes are being made. But part of the insinuation that you're making today is that, in fact, nothing has changed. Why would you say that?
Well, if you look at the construction of Eskom, there's one new CEO and a new board. What substantive change? And six people have resigned. What substantive change has been made for 47,000 workers?
So whose agenda then are these people serving? Because it sounds like you're saying that, well, since the days of the Guptas, nothing has changed. And in fact, the very same people who would have been there to help the Guptas get a foot into Eskom, which of course you were also, in the instance of what we're talking about, accused of being an accomplice in that, you're saying that the majority of people who would have been part of that process remain at Eskom.
Yes, they remain at Eskom, and you must remember, there are a multitude of stakeholders. So I can't say to you it's this or that. While we were investigating, we had so many submissions in respect of irregularities in Eskom. It would take, you know, forever to clean up.
But why must we take your word against that of Advocate Nasir Kasim, who is seen as an independent chairperson of this process?
Well, I doubt whether he was independent, as he's paid by Eskom and chosen by Eskom.
So you feel that he's not independent?
No, he's not independent. You know, this had a determined agenda with a determined outcome. And I say so in my papers as well.
Yes, but I really need you to just point me to who has the agenda, whose interests are being served here. Because obviously you are accused of having served an interest that pointed straight to the Gupta's door, and you're saying that is not the case. There's a different story you're offering. So I'm asking, whose agenda are these people serving?
Look, there is an existing senior management, and I'm not only talking about an executive management, because that's about 10 or 11 people. There are all those executive managers at power stations, and there's a substantial amount of executive, what we call E-band managers. That, now we're doing lifestyle audits. 90 years later, you know, these people have been appointed for, and they've been in their positions for about 20 odd years.
How long have you been at Eskom?
I started in Eskom in 2006.
All right, so that means that you've been there for about 12 years.
Mm.
So the parliamentary inquiry took place?
In 2017.
So out of those 12 years, 11 years into your stay at Eskom, only then did you feel it necessary to raise the problems, some of the challenges and perhaps improprieties that were taking place?
Well, Cathy, I started as a junior chief legal advisor in Eskom. So the first time that I was exposed to board and executive process was round about 2015, when I became the manager in the office of the chairman of the board.
When did you first realize irregularities concerning contracts?
Well, in contracts, in procurement, there were a lot. I worked with the SIU at that time. The SIU was investigating coal contracts. There were a number of investigations by Deloitte. So we did work with a number of external agencies as we went along.
Because, of course, part of the concern is that you also blew the whistle at a time that seemed that it was convenient for you to come out as a whistleblower. You could have, and I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, do you take that?
No, I take the point, but you must understand, when you're close to something, you don't really see the bigger picture. Pravin Gordhan made the challenge to us to connect the dots. I was challenged quite dramatically at one of the press briefings, and I think that jolted my conscience. That was early in 2017. It started making me think about what are we actually doing. I spoke to a number of journalists. You will see from my submission to Advocate Kasim, there were about 21 disclosures that I made, including the public protector, including the FBI.
So what had happened to your conscience before 2017?
I think one would just say we were doing a job. This is a job, you don't ask questions, you're instructed to do so, you do it. But when you start being pummeled on a daily basis by the media, by people inside, it got to a point where there wasn't a day when we weren't questioned about the decisions that were being made. And that obviously now, at that point, I couldn't say I didn't know. My question to myself was, okay, now that you know, what are you going to do about it?
All right. Susanne Daniels, that's where we'll leave it for tonight. It's all we have time for. Thanks for coming on. And of course, she was dismissed by Eskom earlier today. After the break, we'll get a reaction to part of what she said with the former CEO, Matela Koko, and energy expert, Chris Yelland.